All right, away we go. Another round of blues, as they say. Today won't be too long, but I didn't feel like writing it, and I don't know. Maybe I'm not going to feel like writing for a while. I'm not sure. I've got a couple unfinished things, mostly about entertainment. They always get less traction. Let me pull up something for my feet here. So, um, I noticed like another thing just like is like disappeared this week. You know, like a piece of information that uh, used to just be part of the public domain and is now gone. You know, because whoever runs the internet and whoever runs history has decided it's time to change things up or to make something that they don't like go away. So I wanted to talk about a few of those things today that have been vanished, just vanished from the public record. Pretty crazy. Um, some of them I think were done uh, intentionally by the intelligence communities. Some of them are a little more mysterious, and I'll address those as well. But the first one that I want to get off my chest, because I just like hate this guy. I despise this guy. All right, Wolf Blitzer. Okay, Wolf Blitzer, or pardon me, Wolf Blitzer of CNN. The guy's a fraud. Okay, he's a fraud. Just like he's like Ben Shapiro 1.0. Okay, um, Wolf Blitzer uh, is a former spokesperson for a bunch of like different Jewish slash Israeli interests. He's a propagandist. He's a Zionist. Nothing he says should be trusted. He shouldn't even be on the air. I mean, frankly, you know, like Wolf Blitzer is the type of guy who should be spat on if you see him on the street, which you might not because he's like ridiculously short. I mean, Wolf Blitzer is tiny, you know, like a little turd, you know, a little turd, not one of those big long ones, little turd. So, but the reason I bring up Wolf is when I lived in D.C., like in the late 80s, early 90s, like everybody knew Wolf Blitzer's real name was Leslie. Like he hated it. Like, you know, and if you called him Leslie, like inside CNN or whatever, you'd get fired. You know, he hated it. But his name's Leslie, you know? Wolf Blitzer's real name is not Wolf. Of course he's not. He's a dwarf. He's a loser. He's a mouthpiece. He's a scumbag. You know? He might be shorter than Ben Shapiro, and that's really short. So, anyway, A, Wolf Blitzer's a piece of shit. B, he's a Zionist propagandist for Israel, and he hates America. C, he's a dwarf. D, his name was originally Leslie, and they've covered it up because he hates that his name is Leslie, which means he hates himself, which means he hates everything else. So, Wolf Blitzer, fuck you. Get out of my country. All right? Hate that guy. And his name is Leslie. Call him Leslie. All right. Number two. This is actually much more important than the fact that Wolf Blitzer, is really named Leslie. Um, uh, placebos. Placebos. This one is pretty amazing to me. But when they first dropped the initial round of mRNA injections, they're not vaccines, they're injections, um, they said on the CDC website for like 3 days, I think, that roughly one third, 33% of all the mRNA injections were placebos. They weren't the active mRNA technology. That information has completely been wiped from the CDC website everywhere. Everywhere. It's gone. And it's curious to me that, like, even people who know this, like, even people inside the vaccine risk awareness community are fully aware of this, but nobody talks about it. You know, maybe because they can't prove it. You know, I'm sure if, you know, the Intel communities or whoever's running them, you know, wants to make it look like this has never been online, they can make it look that way. But I'm telling you, it's there. And that also explains why we're not getting the mass die off and the mass heart attacks and the mass mental derangement, at least yet, from these mRNA vaccines because the early rounds had placebos. All right. So that's two. The third one. Um, all right. This one is weird. All right. The Berenstein and the Berenstain Bears. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with this. If you're in the conspiracy community, I'm sure you are. Uh, the narrative is such that there were these children's books. Who was it? Stan and somebody else, Bernstein slash Stain. Um, uh, and there was a whole series of books. A lot of people, myself included, remember these books being called the Berenstein books. Somewhere along the line, all the books somehow got changed, or always were, the Berenstain books. Now, I am in a somewhat unique perspective here on this story because when I was in high school in Hunterdon County, New Jersey, my job was a page at the Hunterdon County Library, and not like a page of a book, obviously, but the page was they did grunt work mostly. We put the books back on the shelves. I mean, that was it, really. Occasionally, we would, I don't even know. I was going to say we cleaned up stuff, but I never remember actually doing anything like that. So maybe we did just put books on the shelves. Oh, sometimes we would wait behind the counter when a senior personality was on. Who cares, right? You don't care. So anyway, I worked in Hunterdon County Library for 3 years. I spent 3 years shelving the Berenstein Bears books. I never shelved a Berenstain Bears books. I only shelved Berenstein books. And like, I worked with other high school kids, other high school boys, and we would joke about sex and girls and all that sort of stuff. And we worked with a couple girls, and they were not uptight, let's say. Nobody ever made a joke about the Berenstain Bears. I can promise you, that crew that I worked with, there would have been jokes about the Berenstain Bears. So something happened there. And I don't think that like Intel or Mossad or anybody went into every library in every home in the United States of America and changed out the Berenstein books to the Berenstain books. And, my wild, crazy, beyond a conspiracy theory, because this isn't even a conspiracy, it's a wild shot in the dark. The Berenstain books are a sign for people with eyes to see that our reality has been shifted from a pure and good one into a stained one. All right? We got to get the stain out. We have to remove the stain. What is the stain? If I figure it out, I'll let you know. But I think on an individual basis, we can determine who the stains are. Not on a communal basis, but on an individual basis, we know who the stains are. Wolf Blitzer. Wolf Blitzer. What a clown. What a clown. You never hear about him anymore either, which is probably good because, all the Zionist propagandists, their time runs out after a while. People see them for what they are. And then, you got to upgrade to, I don't know, Ben Shapiro, And let us note, and I might talk into this more detail, that Ben Shapiro was interviewed in depth by Megyn Kelly this week. Yes, the rising star of alt media and YouTube punditry, Megyn Kelly, the beautiful Botoxed blonde who was the only person permitted to interview James Alefantis and the Comet Ping Pong pizza place after all those weird stories. And Megyn didn't ask a single tough question. Not one. And then right after that, she got a new job at NBC for $69 million. There's another tell, as far as I'm concerned. Again, just my opinion. But that's only scratching the surface on Megyn Kelly, and we'll maybe get back to her in a week or two because she's never been more popular, which means she may never be more dangerous. And so we need to focus on her. And her crew, who I generally like, actually. Or her crew at Devil May Care Media, let's note. That's the name of her media organization. Devil May Care Media. What you telling us, Megyn? You know better than us? Whether the devil cares? Just curious. Fill us in, Megyn. So, hey, sorry. I like going off on this long digression. Maybe we'll get back to it someday, but not today. I want to keep this under 11 minutes, if not 10. But to truncate it down, I would say beware of the establishment media talking heads who have now moved into the internet punditry podcast sphere. And I would include Megyn Kelly in that. and I would include Tucker Carlson in that, and then I would include all the people who have been unsuccessful trying to do what Tucker and Megyn have done, like the what's his face loser Cuomo brother, Fredo Cuomo. I can't remember his real name, um, and Don Lemon. You know, all the losers, all the CNN losers. None of them have been able to make it on their own. But the ones who are making it on their own, take what they got to say with a grain of salt. You know, the people who run the show very much realize that corporate media has lost its traction and they need credible heroes to spout their narratives in the independent realm. The fact that Megyn Kelly had Ben Shapiro on and basically gave him a tongue bath for a day yesterday should pretty much tell you where she's coming from and who she serves. And that's what you all should like be trying to discern from the bigger the face gets on the stage. Which of the secret societies does this person serve that has permitted them to reach this level of accessibility into my communications sphere? The bigger they are, the more likely it is that they're serving somebody else and it ain't you. So, that's it. We'll be back later.